He thought he was being generous. She saw a declaration of war. Witnessed a shocking chess game that brought down an empire built on prejudice. Card declined again, ma'am. Do you have another card? The coffee shop cashier repeated with growing impatience, ignoring the line forming behind Camila Hayes. Camila felt the heat rise in her neck. It wasn't embarrassment, it was controlled anger. At 35, Camila had learned that moments like this revealed more about others than they did about herself. The corporate card had been cancelled exactly 6 months ago, obviously, but she kept her personal account strictly organized. Try this one, she said calmly, handing over another card, also declined. The young man snorted, clearly annoyed. That's when a familiar voice cut through the air behind her like a knife. Hey, cashier, just put her coffee on my tab. Camila turned slowly. Daniel Thorne, perfectly parted gray hair, a navy suit that cost more than some people's 3-month salary, and that condescending smile she knew so well. The same man who 6 months ago had said in front of the entire board, Camila, sweetheart, you know we love your unique perspective here, but maybe it's time for you to seek opportunities that better align with your cultural background. The same Daniel who had invented a non-existent restructuring to fire her from Thorne Industries, the company she had helped double in size in 4 years as director of strategy. No, thank you, Camila replied, her voice polite but icy. Oh, come on, everyone's been there. It's just coffee. Daniel laughed, holding his Apple Watch up to the payment reader. $5.80 won't break me. The payment was approved instantly. Camila accepted the coffee with a whispered thank you, watching Daniel walk away toward the executive tables without even looking back. To him, she was just another person in need of charity, a story to tell at dinner about how generous he had been to a person in need. That morning, he had no idea who she really was, or rather, who she was becoming. As she walked toward the exit, Camila felt the weight of the envelope in her purse. The investors' signatures were there, along with the contracts that would change everything. 6 months of meticulous planning, secret meetings, building something Daniel could never imagine. She stopped at the door and looked back one last time. Daniel was sitting alone, typing furiously on his cell phone, completely oblivious to the hurricane that was about to hit his life. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who should have known your true worth, then you know that the best revenge isn't served hot, it's served cold, calculated, and at the perfect moment. Subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple $5 coffee would become the catalyst for the most spectacular downfall the corporate world has ever witnessed. 6 months earlier, Camila had walked into that same Thorne Industries meeting room carrying the proposal that would save the company from bankruptcy, 42 slides of pure strategic genius, the result of sleepless nights analyzing data that no one else had been able to decipher. Gentlemen, she had said, adjusting her glasses as she connected her laptop to the projector, our numbers show that we can not only survive the crisis, but double our profit margin in 18 months. The silence in the room was palpable. Daniel Thorne sat at the head of the table, playing with a $15,000 Mont Blanc pen he had inherited from his father. Next to him were 5 other white executives in identical suits, all heirs to family fortunes. Interesting perspective, Camila, Daniel had said, without even looking at the screen, but don't you think you're, how can I put this, overestimating our ability to change? This company has traditions that go back 4 generations. Traditions, the word he always used when he meant, we don't want people like you making important decisions here. Camila had ignored the veiled insult and continued. For 2 hours, she presented irrefutable figures, projections based on market analyses that had taken months to compile, strategies that would revolutionize not only Thorne but the entire industry. At the end, the applause was polite, lukewarm. Thank you, Camila, we'll consider your suggestions. Daniel had lied with that patronizing smile she knew so well. 3 weeks later, Thorne Industries publicly announced a revolutionary expansion strategy, word for word Camila's proposal, presented by Daniel as if it were his own creation. The company's profits tripled in 6 months. Camila didn't even get a thank you. And when she dared to question it, Daniel called her into his office. Look, Camila, you're very intense, he had said, leaning back in his Italian leather chair. "Maybe it's time for you to look for something more suited to your profile. I'm sure there are NGOs that would love to have someone with your dedication." NGOs, as if she were some kind of well-intentioned volunteer instead of the most brilliant strategic mind the company had ever had. Now, walking through the streets of Manhattan with the coffee Daniel had generously paid for, Camila smiled for the first time in months, not a smile of gratitude, but one of anticipation. The envelope in her purse contained more than investor signatures. It contained the birth certificate of Genesis Capital, a strategic consulting firm she had built in absolute secrecy over the past 6 months. 15 former Thorne employees had already signed contracts with her, not just employees, the best talent Daniel had fired or ignored over the years for being different, brilliant women, Black and Latino professionals he considered out of step with the company culture. Each of them harbored resentment. Each of them had inside information. And each of them was hungry for justice. But best of all, Daniel had no idea. To him, Camila was just a problematic former employee who had understood her place and quietly disappeared. What an arrogant fool. Her phone vibrated. A message from Marcus Chen, Thorne's former IT director, whom Daniel had fired for cultural fit issues, translation, for being a first-generation Asian American who spoke fluent Mandarin and had too many foreign ideas. Meeting confirmed for tomorrow. I brought a special gift, all the backups of Thorne's internal emails from the last 5 years, including the conversations Daniel thought he had deleted. Camila closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Daniel Thorne had made the classic mistake of powerful men. He had completely underestimated the woman he had humiliated. What he didn't know was that every veiled insult, every stolen opportunity, every condescending smile had been carefully catalogued in her memory. And now, every injustice would become fuel for the destruction machine she had built with the surgical precision of someone who understands that the best revenge isn't served hot, it's served cold, calculated, and at the moment when your enemy feels most secure and invincible. What Victoria didn't know was that every arrogant post, every cruel comment, every public display of her prejudice, was being catalogued by someone who understood a fundamental truth: privileged people always feel untouchable until they discover they're not. 24 hours after Daniel's charity coffee, Camila was sitting in the boardroom on the 23rd floor of an inconspicuous building in the financial district. Around the oval table were 15 professionals, representing the most talented and underrated in the American corporate market. Marcus Chen connected his laptop to the projector and smiled with malicious satisfaction. "Guys, you're going to love this." The screen lit up with a cascade of internal emails from Thorne Industries, not just ordinary emails, but correspondence that Daniel thought he had permanently deleted, including private conversations between him and other executives about employee cultural fit. "This one's my favorite," Marcus said, clicking on a message from 2 years ago. "We need to find a subtle way to clean house. Too much diversity is affecting our traditional dynamic, especially that Camila, too assertive for a woman in her position." A murmur of outrage rippled through the room. Patricia Vance, a former marketing director who had been reorganized out of the company after questioning pay disparities, clenched her fists. "There's more," Marcus continued, opening another file. Here he discusses specifically how to appropriate Camila's ideas. "Her strategy is brilliant, but we can't let someone, let's say, non-traditional, take credit for saving the company. I'll present it as my own." Camila remained calm, but her eyes shone with an intensity that made some colleagues realize they were witnessing something much bigger than a simple business meeting. "This is just the appetizer," she said calmly. "Marcus, show them what we found about the government contracts." The next revelation was devastating. Daniel had systematically lied on bids for federal contracts, inflating diversity numbers at the company by using contract and temporary employees to mask the reality that 92% of Thorne's leadership was white men from privileged families. "Federal fraud," whispered David Park, a former legal counsel. "That could result in jail time." "It can, and it will," Camila replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But first, let's play a little game." She stood up and walked to the window, watching the movement of the streets below. "Do you know what the dumbest mistake Daniel made yesterday?" Everyone looked at her curiously. He paid me for a $5.80 cup of coffee. She laughed softly. A man who stole my idea, who made millions off my work, who fired me out of pure prejudice, thought he was being generous by paying for my coffee. Patricia shook her head in disbelief. This man's audacity knows no bounds. Exactly. And that audacity is exactly what will destroy him. Camila returned to the table and opened a folder with documents. Genesis Capital officially exists as of today. Our first client? Thorne Industries itself. What do you mean? Asked Marcus, confused. I got an email this morning. Camila connected her phone to the projector. Daniel, in his infinite arrogance, has decided he needs outside consulting to optimize corporate efficiency after last quarter's numbers started to slip. The message was from Amanda Foster, Thorne's executive secretary and Camila's former colleague, who had been keeping in touch secretly over the past few months. Mr. Thorne would like to know if you know of any discreet and competent consulting firms. He mentioned that he had an inspiring conversation yesterday with a young female entrepreneur and is rethinking how the company can help emerging talent. The silence in the room was deafening. He has no idea who I am, Camila continued, her voice heavy with irony. To him, I'm just a struggling black person he helped out of the goodness of his heart. Now he wants to hire a company to solve the problems he created, without realizing the company is me. David Park couldn't contain his laughter. That's genius. He's literally going to pay you to destroy him. Even better, Camila opened another folder. Amanda gave me the list of clients Thorne has lost in the last 6 months. Coincidentally, they've all decided to outsource their strategic consulting services. Marcus understood immediately. You're already sabotaging the company from the inside. It's not sabotage when you offer a better service, Camila corrected with a smile. It's pure capitalism. Patricia leafed through the documents, impressed. Camila, this represents at least $40 million in lost contracts. $52 million to be exact. And that's just the beginning. Camila sat back down. Because tomorrow afternoon, Genesis Capital will present a proposal to Thorne Industries to solve their efficiency and modernization problems. And what's the plan? Asked David. Simple. We're going to do exactly what Daniel has always done, we're going to use his ideas against him. Camila opened her laptop and showed him a flawless presentation. For 6 months, Amanda has been feeding me all the company's internal strategies, every plan, every decision, every move Daniel considers genius. And you're going to present them as if they were hers? No, Camila shook her head. I'm going to present solutions that expose exactly how all his decisions are leading the company to bankruptcy. I'm going to prove with irrefutable data that he's incompetent and only got where he is through privilege and luck. Marcus leaned back in his chair, impressed. And he's going to pay you to humiliate him publicly, in front of the entire board of directors, in front of investors, in front of the trade media he himself will invite to show how he's innovating by hiring outside consultants. Camila's phone vibrated. A message from Amanda, meeting confirmed for tomorrow at 3 p.m. Mr. Thorne wants the entire board present. He said it will be a milestone in the company's history. Camila showed the message to everyone, and the smile that spread across the room was one of pure anticipation. A milestone indeed, she said quietly, just not the way he thinks. While her colleagues discussed the final details of the operation, Camila looked out the window once more. Daniel was probably congratulating himself on his good deed from the day before, unaware that he had just accelerated his own destruction. Because what men like Daniel Thorne never understood was that underestimating a brilliant black woman wasn't just prejudice, it was professional suicide. And tomorrow, in a boardroom full of people who had always doubted her potential, Camila would finally show them the true meaning of the word adequate. The question hanging in the air wasn't whether Daniel would survive what was coming, it was whether there would be anything left of his career after the storm passed. 3 o'clock sharp. Camila entered the Thorne Industries boardroom, carrying a leather briefcase and a smile that revealed absolutely nothing of the hurricane that was about to descend upon that place. Daniel Thorne sat at the head of the table, beaming with satisfaction. At his side were 12 company executives and 3 business journalists whom he had personally invited to document his innovation in corporate management. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce Camila Hayes, CEO of Genesis Capital," Daniel announced, with his chest puffed out. "A talented young entrepreneur whom I had the pleasure of meeting yesterday, and who will help us revolutionize our operational efficiency." Camila nodded politely and connected her laptop to the projector. "Thank you, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here to solve Thorne Industries' problems." "Solve problems?" Daniel laughed. "Well, maybe that's a strong word. Let's say, optimize." "No, Daniel. Solve problems." Camila clicked on the first slide. "Because after analyzing your internal data, I can say with absolute certainty that this company is less than 6 months away from total bankruptcy." Daniel's smile froze. Some executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. "Let's start with the basics," Camila continued, her voice calm and professional. "In the last 18 months, Thorne has lost $52 million in contracts that were considered guaranteed. Would anyone here be able to explain why?" Total silence. "No? Then let me clarify." She clicked to the next slide, showing an audio recording. "This is a recorded conversation between Mr. Thorne and a potential client 4 months ago." Daniel's voice echoed through the speakers. "Look, between us, we know that our team doesn't have the same diversity as other companies, but that means we have less drama and more focus on the job at hand." Daniel paled. "How did you get this recording?" "Oh, Daniel, did you really think you could fire 15 talented people without any of them keeping evidence of the real reasons?" Camila smiled coldly. "Next question, does anyone here know why major corporate clients canceled contracts in the same week?" One of the journalists began taking notes furiously. Camila clicked again. The screen showed a series of internal emails with the prejudiced messages Marcus Chen had recovered. "We need to find a subtle way to clean up the department. Too much diversity is affecting our traditional dynamics," she read aloud. This email was sent by Mr. Thorne to the entire board 2 years ago. "That's been taken out of context," Daniel shouted, jumping up from his chair. "Has it?" Camila remained unperturbed. "Then let's look at the full context." What followed was a devastating 20-minute presentation, discriminatory emails, recordings of meetings where Daniel made racist comments, forged documents for government contracts, and most humiliating of all, proof that he had systematically stolen ideas from employees he later fired. "And here we come to the crux of the matter," Camila said, showing him the strategic proposal she had created 2 years earlier. This strategy that saved the company and earned Mr. Thorne a $5 million bonus was created entirely by an employee he fired 3 weeks later for cultural fit issues. Daniel was visibly sweating now. Who are you?" Camila finally smiled. It was a smile that carried 2 years of humiliation, 6 months of meticulous planning, and the sweet taste of justice finally being served. "I am Camila Hayes, former director of strategy at this company. The same person you fired for being too assertive for a woman in her position. The same person you bought coffee for yesterday, thinking you were doing charity work." The silence in the room was deafening. Daniel leaned on the table, his legs clearly shaking. "But the most interesting part of our story," Camila continued, "is that in the last 6 months, 15 talented former employees you fired out of prejudice have started their own companies. And do you know who their main clients are?" She clicked on the final slide, an impressive list of companies and contracts now belonging to the network of professionals Daniel had discarded. The total value of the business that has migrated to our network? $120 million annually. Nearly 3 times Thorne's current revenue. One of the journalists raised his hand. "Miss Hayes, what does this mean for the future of Thorne Industries?" Camila looked directly at Daniel, who had collapsed in his chair, his face white as a sheet. "It means that arrogance has a price, and that price is total irrelevance." She calmly closed her laptop. "Genesis Capital has no interest in saving Thorne. Our goal today was simply to show you the consequences of building an empire based on prejudice and incompetence disguised as tradition." Daniel tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. You planned all this? I did. Camila picked up her briefcase. Every humiliation you put me through, every opportunity you stole, every condescending smile was carefully catalogued and turned into fuel for this moment. The executives looked at each other, clearly realizing that they were witnessing not only the end of a company but the complete destruction of a man who had confused privilege with competence for too long. Oh, and Daniel, Camila stopped at the door. Thanks for the coffee yesterday. It was the most expensive $5.80 of your life. As she left, the sound of cell phones ringing simultaneously echoed through the room. Investors, clients, and partners who had watched the live broadcast, courtesy of one of the journalists present, were already canceling contracts and withdrawing financial contributions. Daniel Thorne, the man who had built an empire on the talent of others, now watched that same empire crumble in real time. And it all started with a simple act of charity, paying for a woman's coffee whom he should never have underestimated. But one question remained that would make all the difference: would Daniel be able to pick himself up from this devastating fall, or had his arrogance dug a hole too deep for any chance at redemption? What would happen to a man accustomed to power when he discovered he had lost absolutely everything because of $5.80? 18 months later, Camila sat in her new penthouse office in the heart of Manhattan, taking in the panoramic view of the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Genesis Capital had become the most respected strategic consulting firm on the East Coast, with annual revenues of $230 million. Ms. Hayes, Forbes is here for the cover interview, her assistant announced over the intercom. Camila smiled. The magazine had chosen her as CEO of the Year, the first black woman to receive the title in 15 years. The headline would read, "How an Unfair Firing Created a $200 million Empire." Meanwhile, across town, Daniel Thorne sat in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens, typing his resume on a used laptop he had bought on eBay. Thorne Industries had gone completely bankrupt 8 months after Camila's presentation. Investors withdrew $400 million in funding, major clients canceled billion-dollar contracts, and a federal fraud investigation resulted in fines that consumed the company's last remaining assets. Daniel had lost everything: the Connecticut mansion, the yacht, the bank accounts, all seized to pay debts and fines. His wife filed for divorce and took half of what was left. His children, embarrassed by the public scandal, changed their last name. Daniel Thorne, seeking entry-level opportunities, he muttered to himself, typing a humiliating description for LinkedIn. 49 years old, former CEO of a bankrupt company, trying to find work as a junior analyst. The irony did not go unnoticed by anyone in the industry. That afternoon, during the Forbes interview, the journalist asked Camila about the exact moment she decided to destroy Daniel. "It wasn't when he fired me unfairly," she replied calmly. "It wasn't even when I found out he had stolen my strategy. It was when he paid for my coffee, thinking he was doing charity for someone in need." "What do you mean?" That gesture revealed exactly who he was, a man who confused privilege with superiority, who genuinely believed that paying $5.80 was saving someone less fortunate. Camila paused, choosing her words carefully. "He didn't see me as an equal who was temporarily struggling. He saw me as someone who was naturally inferior and deserved his pity." 3 weeks later, the magazine hit the newsstands. The cover photo showed Camila in her office with a headline in bold letters, "The $5 Revenge That Cost an Empire." Marcus Chen, now CTO of Genesis Capital, walked into her office with a mischievous smile. "Camila, you have to see this." He showed her his phone. It was a video on LinkedIn of Daniel trying to promote himself for job openings. "Hi, I'm Daniel Thorne, and I'm looking for an opportunity to restart my career in an inclusive and diverse corporate environment." "Inclusive and diverse?" Camila repeated, laughing. The words he despised most have become his only hope of getting a job. "There's more," Marcus continued. "I got a message from him yesterday. He wants to know if Genesis has any openings." The room was completely silent. "He actually had the audacity to ask you for a job?" asked Patricia Vance, now director of marketing, who had joined the conversation. "Not only that," Marcus showed her the message, I would like to apply for any position available. I have leadership experience and believe I can contribute significantly to a company with values as strong as those of Genesis." Camila shook her head in disbelief. He destroyed 15 careers out of Prejudice, stole ideas, defrauded government contracts, and now he wants to work for the company created by the people he fired? What was your response? Patricia asked. I sent a 2-line email, Marcus smiled. Mr. Thorne, we appreciate your interest in Genesis Capital. Unfortunately, your experience does not align with our culture of respect, integrity, and meritocracy. Sincerely, Human Resources. Camila stood up and walked to the window, watching the city below. Somewhere in that sea of people, Daniel was probably in another humiliating job interview, trying to explain to junior recruiters why a century-old company had gone bankrupt under his leadership. "Do you know what the most rewarding part of all this is?" she said without turning around. "It's not that we destroyed Daniel, it's that we proved that real talent has no color, gender, or social class. It's that we created a company where people like us don't have to accept crumbs disguised as opportunities." Patricia nodded. 15 former employees who were discriminated against have become millionaire entrepreneurs. That's a silent revolution. And the best part, Marcus added, is that we did it all by playing by the rules. It wasn't sabotage, it wasn't crime, it was simply competence overcoming privilege. Camila finally turned, a genuine smile on her face. Daniel thought he was being generous by paying for my coffee. What he didn't know was that those $5.80 would become the most expensive investment of his life. She looked at the team, talented people who had been discarded, underestimated, humiliated by men like Daniel, and who now ran one of the most successful businesses in New York. The real revenge was never about destroying Daniel, she said. It was about building something he could never imagine. It was proving that when you underestimate the right people, you're not just losing talent, you're creating your own replacements. That night, Camila passed by the same coffee shop where it had all begun. The same cashier was still working there, and he recognized her immediately from the Forbes magazine displayed on the counter. "Ms. Hayes, it's an honor to have you here," he said, clearly impressed. She ordered her usual coffee, a large latte with an extra shot. When it came time to pay, she handed him a black card with no limit. "Approved," the cashier announced, smiling. Camila took her coffee and looked around. There were no more arrogant executives paying for her drinks out of pity. There was no more humiliation disguised as charity. There was just a black woman, CEO of a $200 million company, proving every day that the best revenge isn't getting back at those who hurt you, it's rising so high they can't reach you. If this story has inspired you to never settle for less than you deserve, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that underestimating the right people isn't just unfair, it's the most expensive mistake anyone can make, because while some pay for coffee out of pity, others build empires out of justice.